All right, so today we are starting the book of Ezekiel. All right, so if this is your first time here, we have been going through the entire Bible from Genesis, and we're going to go all the way to Revelation, and it's going to take 5 years. We are like in the middle. We're in year 3. And so, if you've been here for a little bit, you're like, man, like this guy only preaches from the Old Testament. We'll get there. Okay, next year we're going to be in the New Testament, but we're in Ezekiel now. And it is 48 chapters, and we're going to do this all in one message. And so you're thinking, what? Like, how can you do that? There's so much in Ezekiel. You don't do it justice in one message. And that is true, but there's a reason for it. One of the reasons is that if we actually went in depth and didn't look at things from a high level, when I first kind of outlined this 5-year series, I was like, this could be like 15 or 20 years, right? Like Jesus might be back by the time we're done. And so I kind of had to make a decision, like, how long do I want to have this go for? So I thought 5 years about what people could handle. After that, you're like, we haven't heard the word Jesus preached in like 7 years. So it takes 5 years, okay. And so we're really looking at this from a really high level, and I kind of had to make decisions on like, which part do we kind of go deeper into, and which part do we kind of really pull out and zoom out, okay? And the other thing is this, a lot of the themes that are in Ezekiel are also in Jeremiah and Isaiah, which we were just in for like the majority of the year already, right? And so I was like, I just can't just do that again, even though they're all there, but there's other stuff in here. So that's why, and Ezekiel, it's a weird book. I would argue, apart from Revelation, Ezekiel is like the weirdest book. There's a lot of weird imagery here, and I don't want to get too bogged down in of like, oh, what does this mean? What do you think this creature symbolizes? Like, I don't want to get bogged down to that because I really want to look at it from a high level of like, what is actually happening in this whole book, and what is Ezekiel trying to really say to the people, and then what does it mean to us? Okay, and so how are we going to tackle this book? I'm going to give a quick brief introduction, and then we're going to look at the overview of the 3 sections of the book, and then finally we're going to see how it's relevant to us today. Okay? So, brief introduction. The author of Ezekiel is Ezekiel. He's from a priestly family, and the audience is the Israelites from the first exile of Judah, and this is before the fall of Jerusalem, right? And you're like, oh, what's going on here? Okay, so a little background, all right? So by the time when we were in Jeremiah, where Jeremiah was talking about like the fall of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, that's a lot of stuff that happened already, right? So the Babylonians had already come and kind of conquered the area, and so there was a first round of deportations and the Israelites being exiled, and this was back in 597 BC, and this was when the king of Judah, Jehoiachin, was deported, right? The fall of Jerusalem happens in 586 BC, so you're talking like a decade later. Okay, so that's why it's like, wait, I thought it was going to be destroyed. There's multiple exiles, and so Ezekiel was among the exiles that first time. Okay, and so when Ezekiel's doing his thing, right, he's in Babylon, right? He's not in Judah anymore, and the audience are the Israelites who have already been exiled in Babylon. Okay. The time frame and context of the book, it's during the latter part of Jeremiah's ministry. So we were just in Jeremiah, and you're thinking like, hey, what's going on? So Jeremiah is doing his prophecies, and he's speaking to the people in Judah who are still in Israel, right? And Ezekiel is speaking to the Israelites who have already been deported in Babylon, right? And so they're actually contemporaries, right? And so they actually, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Daniel are all happening at the same time. Not exactly every part of each book is happening at the same time, but they cross over, right? And so we're going to get into Daniel next, and so it's like the same time frame. So again, if you want to think about this like entertainment, these are like spin-offs, right? It's like God has one main story, right? That's the scripture. And then you have these books that are telling that story, but from a different perspective to a different audience in different locations. Okay, and so that's kind of what we have. The content of the book is weird. It's weird, right? It's visions and prophecies, right? And so a lot of it just doesn't seem like normal, because it's not. It's very strange. And so that's kind of like a very brief introduction of the book. And now we're going to jump into the actual content of the book. And it's really split up into 3 parts. And so part 1 is chapters 1 to 24, and it's the judgment against Israel. And if you've been with us for a little while, then you're like, I kind of heard this already, right? But this is the Bible, right? So this is what God wants to tell us, right? So if it's repeated multiple times in the Bible, a lot of times it means it's kind of important, okay? So remember, the northern kingdom, right? This is like after Solomon. The northern kingdom of Israel versus the southern kingdom of Judah. The northern kingdom has already fallen. So Israel is, in a sense, no more. And so when they say Israel, they're just referring to what is left, which is the southern kingdom, which is Judah, right? So this is why sometimes when you use the same word for different things and over different times, it gets a little confusing. But that's what's going on, right? And part 1, remember, this is Ezekiel in Babylon with those exiled Israelites. Part 1, it ends in chapter 24 with the siege of Jerusalem. So all the stuff that Jeremiah was talking about, right, Ezekiel is also talking about, and then it kind of ends in chapter 24 with that siege, okay? And we know this because in chapter 24, verse 1 to 4, it says, in the 9th year, in the 10th month, on the 10th day, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, record this date, this very date, because the king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem this very day, right? And again, right, this is ancient times, so there's not, TikTok and that kind of stuff where we can find out what's happening like instantly, like, oh my goodness, the siege is happening, this is stuff that, like, if somebody's going to tell him, it's going to be many months to travel, right? And so God is telling, like, right now, this is starting to happen. And Ezekiel's vision in this first section is very, very strange. Artists throughout history have tried to paint it, right? I'm not going to read it because it's a big chunk, but his vision in chapter 1 it has inspired artists throughout time, right? You got these 2 famous pieces of art from the 1500s and 1800s, and they're kind of like, what is Ezekiel seeing? There's like wheels, there's like animal kind of things with wings, I don't know, right? And even the title slide I had up for this series, this message, AI did that. I basically took Ezekiel chapter 1 and I told Gemini, I said, hey, create for me an image, landscape, using this description. I want to see what you come up with, right? And it came up with a weird one, right? And actually, online, if you just Google Ezekiel's vision, there's going to be like the famous modern art, but also a lot of different people have just like, just tried to figure it out, right? So it's very strange. But what Ezekiel is seeing in this vision is like the likeness of God's glory, leaving the temple and now somehow traveling and appearing in Babylon, right? In chapter 1, verse 28, part B, it says, this, after all of chapter 1, right? This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down, and I heard the voice of one speaking, right? And so the idea that God's glory would leave the temple and now appear in Babylon is, I don't even know how to describe it. It is like a nightmare. It is the worst possible thing, right? Because think about the history of the Israelites, right? They come out of Egypt, right? They're in the desert. They've got this tabernacle, which was a temporary temple kind of thing, right? But eventually, Solomon builds a temple, right? And this is so exciting. And then when they consecrate the temple, there's this moment where the priests are doing their thing, and then this cloud comes, right? It's like the glory of the Lord fills the cloud, and the priests couldn't even like do what they're supposed to do because it's just too much. Like the glory of God is here, right? After all this time, it's here in this permanent structure. And now Ezekiel is hearing that the siege is beginning, that all this will be gone, right? And of course, to hear it is one thing. To then see it, to see that God's glory is not in the temple anymore and is now like in exile with Ezekiel is horrible for him and for all of the Israelites. And then in it, we find out, right, that the reason why this is happening is because of Israel's idolatry and social injustice, right? And I just want to pause for a moment there because I think one of the interesting things that some Christians believe, or just kind of like that's their brand of Christianity, and I think it kind of fits with ours a little bit, is that we often think that social injustice and those kinds of issues are like secondary, right? And it's like, hey, we got to be talking about the gospel and evangelism and that kind of stuff, and social injustice around the world. That's bad, but it's like secondary. But here we see like God's telling Ezekiel like, hey, the glory and likeness is here. He's like, how could this have happened? It's like, yeah, it's idolatry and social injustice. It's like one of the main reasons, right? And so I think that is important because I think what happens with Christians is, depending on what kind of church you're involved in or what country your church is in, like we start to like focus in on certain issues and certain things like, oh, evangelism, this, and it's important not to like, it's important to look at all of it and see what does God care about? Not just what do I think God cares about. Okay. All right. And so then God has Ezekiel do some very strange and weird things, right? This is just the life of a prophet, right? I'm just going to read it to you because I was trying to like, at first I was trying to say, let me just take notes and like describe. It's just so weird. Let me just read it, okay? Chapter 4, verse 1 to 9. It's going to take a little bit, but just bear with me. Now, son of man, take a block of clay, put it in front of you, and draw the city of Jerusalem on it. Then lay siege to it, erect siege works against it, build a ramp up to it, set up camps against it, and put battering rams around it. Pause for a moment. This is like he's playing. He's making clay figurines. He's like, God says, hey, do the siege for me, but like make it out of clay. Very strange for a prophet, okay? Then take an iron pan, place it as an iron wall between you and the city, and turn your face toward it. It will be under siege, and you shall besiege it. This will be a sign to the people of Israel. I'm going to pause again. So Ezekiel's doing this, but he's a prophet, so people are like, hey, Ezekiel, are you playing? Like, what are you doing? And this is strange, right? But this is what God is calling him to do. It gets weirder. Then lie on your left side. This is literal. God's telling him to do this. And put the sin of the people of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sin for the number of days you lie on your side. I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days, you will bear the sin of the people of Israel. After you have finished this, lie down again, right? Like, can you imagine for a whole year? Now, was God like, hey, you could take breaks? Or was it like, no, like people are going to bring stuff to you. When you do your thing, somebody will have to catch it and take it away. I don't know, right? But like, life of a prophet, right? Okay, where was I? It was, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the people of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. Turn your face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and with bared arm prophesy against her. I will tie you up with ropes, right? So that you cannot turn from one side to the other until you have finished the days of your siege. Wow, right? Take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and spelt, and put them in a storage jar and use them to make bread for yourself. You are to eat it during the 390 days you lie on your side. Right? I don't think like a normal person can just bear this. So I bet Ezekiel was like a weird guy. And if he wasn't, he's probably a weird guy after it, right? But this is strange, okay? But there's more. Chapter 5, verses 1 to 3. Now, son of man, take a sharp sword and shave your head and your beard. When the days of your siege come to an end, burn a third of the hair inside the city. Take a third and strike it with the sword all around the city, and scatter a third to the wind. But take a few hairs and tuck them away in the folds of your garment. Right? Again, he is a prophet, so he's doing this out in public so the people who are remember, these are the people who have been exiled with him, are seeing this. Okay? Just like, in Jeremiah, he's speaking and no one's listening. God tells Ezekiel that they're not going to listen either. Oh man, can you imagine doing something like this and knowing that no one's going to listen? Right? It's one thing if God says, hey, I want you to do these things. It's really going to hurt that side, especially that left side, because it wasn't equal days, right? That left side's really going to hurt. And then, but people are going to come and they're going to repent, and they're going to say, I can't believe that, we have turned away from the Lord and we have treated others so horribly, And Ezekiel saying, oh, at least this is worth it, right? Like people are seeing this, and God's like, hey, I want you to do all this, and no one will listen. No one will listen, right? Life of a prophet. But throughout all this, right, throughout this is, we're in part 1 here, God hasn't abandoned them. Right? In chapter 11, verse 17 to 20, it says, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I will gather you from the nations and bring you back from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you back the land of Israel again. They will return to it and remove all its vile images and detestable idols. I will give them an undivided heart and put a new spirit in them. I will remove from them their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Then they will follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. They will be my people, and I will be their God. Right? There's this message of hope throughout these messages of what's about to come. Right? This idea of an undivided heart and a new spirit. Right? This is something only God can do. So in the midst of the book of Ezekiel, which is, is dark like some of the other prophets, right? You can see it, right? It's here. This is God's grace, right? And this is God's grace, and this is hope. And so we never want to lose sight of that, especially when we're in Scripture where it gets kind of dark, and especially in our lives when our lives get dark, right? God does not abandon us, and there is hope, and God's grace is always there. And then we get to part 2. Part 2 is chapters 25 to 32. It's a judgment against the nations. It's very similar to what we see in the book of Jeremiah when there was a section of the judgment against the nations. And this part is just that God is sovereign, and God is sovereign to use Babylon to punish the surrounding nations as well, the nations of Edom, Moab, Ammon, Egypt, Tyre, and Philistia. Okay, so that's section 2. Then we get to the end, right? That's the last section, section 3. That's chapters 33 to 48, and that section is about comfort for Israel. Okay, and Ezekiel in chapter 33, right in the beginning of the third section, he learns about the fall of Jerusalem. So remember, we were getting to this part where God is saying this is going to happen, and then there's, in chapter 24, it was, hey, the siege has begun. Now in chapter 23, he learns that Jerusalem has fallen, all right? And we see that in chapter 33, verse 21. In the 12th year of our exile, in the 10th month, on the 5th day, a man who had escaped from Jerusalem came to me and said, the city has fallen, right? And so remember, all this stuff is taking time, right? It's not just like, oh, he gets this one vision, he writes this book, and we're done. Like he's got a year of laying it aside. There's a long time, and finally he learns that Jerusalem has fallen. But we got to remember the hope and the grace we saw in chapter 11, this idea of an undivided heart and a new spirit that God is going to give, right? And so God's hope is still there in this last section, and there's hope and promises to Israel, like the people of Israel, the exiles there. But when we read it and we kind of back up a little bit, we see it is so much more than just for the people of Israel. It means so much to us today, right? One of the promises that God gives is that there is going to be a messianic king, right? In chapter 34, verse 11 to 16 says, for this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them, as a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel. I will tend them in a good pasture. I myself will tend my sheep, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. I will shepherd the flock with justice. Right? Notice how there's I, all these, God saying, like, I will do this, right? And so this imagery here is the same imagery we see in the New Testament with like the Lord is my shepherd, right? Jesus being our shepherd, right? We see this, and so as we read this, it's like, oh wow, this is so big, right? Because the exiles are hearing this, and they're hearing, oh, I'm not going to be in Babylon forever, right? I've been here for a long time now, and we know they're there for even after the fall of Jerusalem, 70 years. But God is promising us that we're going to return to our land, right? But for us, it's even bigger than that. Right? When Jesus comes, he uses the same imagery, same kind of words that talked about how he is the good shepherd, right? And so this messianic king, right? Think about it. For the Israelites, they're thinking short term, and God is saying that, right? But there's so much more, right? For us today, for all of us today, here, in the future, across all nations, right? God is the shepherd, right? And God also promises a new Israel, okay? And in chapter 36, verse 24 to 26, it says, for I will take you out of the nations. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back into your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh, right? That symbolism, again, we see it, that a new heart and a heart of flesh, right? Again, this is for Israel then, and it is for us today. And then we get to the last part, hold on. And this is what we read earlier, the valley of the dry bones, right? So Ezekiel sees this vision, right? This valley full of dry bones, and God restores the bones, right? It's kind of, again, weird imagery, like, what does that look like? I'm thinking like CGI kind of stuff, right? Where these bones start coming up and, like generates or regenerates tissue and muscle, whatever, right? But it's actually kind of scary, right? But that's what he sees. And then a wind, right? And that's God's spirit breathes life back into them, right? Bones into this, in the Bible it said a vast army, right? And so here, for Ezekiel, it's like, oh, Israel, they're the spiritually dead, they're bones, and God's going to bring them back, right? But it's more than that, right? It's us. God's Spirit gives life, right? And only God's Spirit can do this. One of the things we had to see here is all of this stuff that's happening is things that are out of the control of the Israelites, right? This is all God's doing. And these are God's promises. Okay, and so Ezekiel ends with the book of Ezekiel ends with two little subsections in this third part, and it's the hope for the nations and hope for all creation, right? The hope for the nations, that we see that in chapters 38 to 39. And again, really weird imagery. I'm not even going to really talk about it, but basically, it's like God defeating all evil, right? There's like, oh, rises up this, and it's one of those things where I think sometimes we get bogged down and we're just like, oh, hey, which nation is this? Which empire is this? How does this work? We're trying to piece it into history of like what's happening. But it's like, no, I don't think we're supposed to take it like literally. I think what God is trying to say is like all these little characters, like it represents all evil and how God is going to defeat all of it. Right? It makes a lot more sense when you read it that way than trying to say, hey, I think this one might be, because back in the days it'll be like, oh, this is the USSR. Oh, we have trouble with them. Of course, the USSR falls, and we're like, oh, it must be Iraq or something like that, right? And that's kind of how people get kind of confused at this stuff, right? But it's really, we're not quite there yet with that slide. Yeah. Like, you're seeing it, like, hell, right? But that's what's that's happening. And the second subsection of the third part of Ezekiel is hope for all creation. That's in chapters 40 to 48, right? And Ezekiel sees this image of a new temple, right? So remember, Ezekiel has been told that Jerusalem has fallen, the temple will be destroyed. And so he's, obviously really upset about that. But now he sees this vision of a new temple rising up. And then God's glory, remember in chapter 1, God's glory, he sees it, and it's like, oh, what are you doing here? Like, what is this doing here? This should be in the temple. Oh, the temple's going to be destroyed, right? The glory goes back to the new temple and resides there. And then out of the temple, there's this vision of a stream coming out that then turns into a river that then gets really big and goes into the Dead Sea and makes life come out of the Dead Sea, right? Because we know the Dead Sea has a lot of salt, and you can't have life when there's too much salt in there. If you're a chemistry person, you're like, wait a minute, if you just add water to a salty solution, it's still going to be salty. I know, I don't think, again, this is image, I don't think this is we're trying to figure out how much water can you put into the Dead Sea to make it so less salty you can have life, because then, you have the volume issue. We're not talking about that, right? This is what I mean when I say we cannot take this stuff literally. You have to think, what is God trying to communicate to us? But that's it. But then you see it. It's like, oh yeah, the new temple, God's glory is there, and then life and its restoration, right? And then a new city appears, right? Because remember, Jerusalem has been destroyed too. A new city appears, but the new city is not called Jerusalem. The name is simply the Lord is there, right? And so for the Israelites who are in exile, they're thinking this is kind of like a new Jerusalem. But if you back up, oh, this is so much bigger than that, right? All evil has been defeated. God's glory is in this new temple. There's this new city. There's life, there's restoration. You can see it. It's so much bigger than that. Right? And that is the message of Ezekiel. Okay, for us, what does it mean? I think the first thing is this: God doesn't abandon us. Actually, God joins us in our exile, right? So Ezekiel is exiled in Babylon, and God's glory appears to him, right? So God's glory doesn't leave the temple because all this idolatry and social injustice, I'm out, going back to heaven. where the air conditioning is better, right? No, God says, I'm going to join you in exile. And so when we think about our lives, we got to know God doesn't abandon us, right? So when we walk away from God, he's still near, right? Like when the Israelites had so much idolatry and so much social injustice in their lives, and that God actually finally said, okay, Babylon's going to come in, right? Even then, they're exiled, but God then went to them and restored them, right? And so for us, a lot of times we think that we have these moments where our relationship with God is good or okay, but then there are times where we kind of like turn away and we just think, oh, God is so far away. No, God is never far away. You can't actually like run away from God, right? He's always going to be there. I mean, you can turn your face away from him and not pay attention and not do anything with God's offer of relationship and love. You can do that, but it doesn't mean that God says, oh, okay, you don't want anything to do with me, I'm out, I'm going, right? He's always there. God is always there. And God is so patient with us, right? So I think that is the first thing. God doesn't abandon us. The second thing is this: God gives spiritual life, right? In chapter 23, the whole valley of dry bones thing, I think what we have to remember is that we are the dry bones. It's actually very common for people in the West, like America, to read that part, and we read ourselves into Ezekiel. And when we kind of read it, we picture ourselves maybe as walking next to Ezekiel with God, with this vision, and God saying, "Oh yes," and we're like, "Oh yes, oh yeah, those dry bones, like America, we got to turn back to the Lord, and and then we're gonna raise up this wonderful country, And it's like, no, we are the dry bones, right? Like, we're not Ezekiel, we're not God, right? No, when we read that section, we have to say, no, I am. We are those dry bones that have no life. And then how did we get life? It was God's Spirit that breathed life into us, right? God gives spiritual life, right? And you're like, okay, what do you mean by spiritual life? Spiritual life is a life that has a relationship with God. Right? You can have life and just kind of do your thing, right? But when we talk about like this life that God breathes into us, this spiritual life, like that's like we were once lost, right? We were dead in our sins, right? Like, and God breathed us new life. And so that's the second thing we have to remember is that God gives spiritual life. And it's the only way, right? Those dead bones can't like say, we're just going to work really hard to be not dead. Right? Like they're just dead, right? And God does that. So it's so important to know. And the second thing, the last point to remember is this: in the end, God defeats evil and restores humanity, right? God defeats all evil, not just a little bit, not just enough to kind of get by. No, God will defeat all evil and restore humanity. And more than just humanity, God's going to restore all of existence. I think our faith would be absolutely transformed if we just really understood those three things, right? As we're kind of going on with our lives in the good and bad and whatever, or the bored days, right? If we just knew that God doesn't abandon us, that God is the one that gives spiritual life, and that one day God is going to defeat all evil and restore all of humanity and all of existence. I think a lot of the struggles we face and a lot of the not just struggles, right? Because I think sometimes we have certain struggles in life, but other times there's not really going on, but our faith also just feels kind of like dead. Like, I think if we really understood this and really held on to these truths, all of a sudden our faith comes alive again, just like those dry bones. So let's pray.